Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to completely dismantle your preconceived notions of reality. Seriously, if you've ever had that quiet, nagging suspicion that the world around you just isn't quite what it seems, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to look at what modern physics, neuroscience, and philosophy actually have to say about the very fabric of existence. So, prepare to have the ground beneath your feet entirely pulled away, because the truth, it's far stranger and honestly far more empowering than anything you've likely heard before.
Okay, I want you to do something for me right now. Just break the fourth wall for a second and look at your hands. Look at the screen in front of you. Look at the room you're sitting in. Something feels a bit off, doesn't it? It's not the lighting, it's not the colors. It's this much deeper, almost visceral sensation. It's the feeling that you're a passenger, like you're a ghost in a machine, looking out through two organic portholes at a world made of solid stuff. It feels, fundamentally, like you're inside a container. But as we're about to see, that feeling is the ultimate illusion.
For the last 20 years or so, we've been totally obsessed with the wrong mystery. We argue constantly about the simulation hypothesis. We debate Elon Musk's coin flips and the green code of the Matrix, arguing over whether reality is made of physical atoms or digital bits. But honestly, that whole standard simulation debate is kind of just a cozy bedtime story. It's a comfortable sci-fi security blanket that protects a massive, ego-stroking assumption. The idea that there's a solid you sitting inside a container called reality. The radical truth is that both the container and the traditional concept of the self inside it are complete illusions.
Okay, let's dive into this. To get to the actual truth, we've got to start peeling the onion. We have to systematically destroy the solid world we think we know by subtracting the obvious layers until the real bones of reality are exposed. And we're going to do this in 3 steps. Step 1, we subtract solid matter. Step 2, we subtract fixed properties. And step 3, which is definitely the hardest of all, we subtract the conscious self as the driver of the vehicle. Let's see what happens when we literally strip everything away.
All right, step 1, matter. When physicists first peeked under the hood of reality, they fully expected to find, tiny, hard billiard balls. But down in the quantum basement, they found absolutely nothing of the sort. Particles don't have fixed locations. They are probability smears. They're basically localized excitations, just ripples in a vast, invisible ocean of underlying quantum fields. That table right in front of you, it isn't solid. It's a frantic, high-speed negotiation between force fields screaming at each other, refusing to occupy the same space. Thinking of the universe as being made of solid stuff is just a fundamental category error.
Which brings us straight to step 2, subtracting fixed properties. Einstein famously insisted that God does not play dice, right? He really believed reality stays stable, even when we turn our backs. Well, he was wrong. Niels Bohr and the Copenhagen interpretation told us the world is actually fuzzy. And then, in 1982, Alain Aspect's experiments with Bell's theorem absolutely drove the final nail into the coffin of local realism. Properties literally do not exist until an interaction occurs. Reality is indeterminate by design. It's a movie that only renders the specific frames you're currently watching.
Now for step 3, and this is where it gets wild, turning the lens inward. Because if the outside world is this shimmering, fuzzy hologram, surely the you watching it is solid and present, right? Well, neuroscience says absolutely not. Your brain does not live in the present. It actually lives in a 500 millisecond lag. That is how long it takes your biology to process sensory data and stitch together a coherent narrative. So by the time you experience a moment, that moment is already ancient history. You're constantly watching a pre-recorded broadcast that's been edited for clarity.
And it goes even deeper than that. Benjamin Libet's famous readiness potential experiments basically showed that brain activity to, say, move your hand, starts milliseconds before you consciously decide to move it. The conscious I that you so strongly identify with is not the author of your actions. It's a post hoc narrator. It's essentially the press secretary for a government it doesn't actually control, coming out to explain why a policy was a good idea only after it's already been implemented. The stage is empty. The driver is totally gone.
So here's the absolute crucial point. If we strip away solid matter, fixed properties, and even the driver of the vehicle, what exactly is left? Let's look at the blueprint of this new world. First up, we've got physicist Carlo Rovelli's relational quantum mechanics. Rovelli proposes that there's no God's eye view of the universe. Properties and states are not absolute things. They only exist relative to an observer. You aren't some isolated observer looking at a static world. You are a node in a shimmering, incredibly dynamic network of interactions. Things only exist in the handshake between them.
Second, we have John Wheeler's participatory universe. Wheeler gave us this amazing concept, it from bit. He argued that every single particle gets its existence from binary yes-no information extracted through observation. His delayed choice experiments prove something that sounds almost unbelievable. The way we measure a photon today can actually determine the path it took millions of years in the past. The past isn't a finished book, it's a draft we're constantly editing. The universe is a self-exciting circuit. It's a conversation that literally requires your active participation to stay real.
And third, we reach what I think is the climax of modern physics, the holographic principle. Pioneered by giants like Bekenstein, Hawking, and Susskind, this mathematically sound principle states that all the information of a 3D volume is actually encoded on a distant 2D boundary. This implies that the three dimensions we move through, length, width, and depth, aren't even fundamental. Space itself is merely an emergent user interface. It's just a convenient way for our systems to organize data. The universe isn't a container filled with stuff. It is a relational, participatory, informational process.
Which brings us right to the edge of the void. Because if reality is just this process of relationships and info interfaces, what exactly are you? We have to face the ghost haunting every science lab out there, the hard problem of consciousness. Science is fantastic at the easy problems like biological computation. We can map exactly how light hits your retina and fires off neurons. But there is a massive, gaping, explanatory gap between that dead data processing and your actual subjective experience. Why does the redness of an apple feel like a quality? Why isn't it all just silent computation happening in the dark?
You know, our culture completely defaults to materialism. We just assume that if you stack enough unconscious dead atoms and neurons together, eventually, like some kind of magic trick, consciousness just pops out. Presto! They call it emergence. But let's be real, this explains absolutely nothing. It's just a linguistic placeholder for a miracle. You cannot get feeling out of stuff any more than you can get a symphony out of a pile of sheet music without a player. Materialism is a total house of cards. Why on earth are we trying to build a foundation out of biological ghosts when we already know matter isn't even solid?
Section 4. Analytic Idealism. Flipping the script on reality. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how we actually solve this impossible riddle.
Analytic idealism asks us to just abandon the impossible task of explaining how dead matter magically produces a mind. Instead, we build on literally the one absolute certainty we have, that consciousness itself is the fundamental substrate of reality. Just let that sink in for a second. In this model, the physical world isn't a container that holds consciousness inside of it. Rather, the physical world, matter, brains, neurons, is simply what conscious experience looks like when viewed from the outside. Dead matter doesn't produce your mind, consciousness produces the illusion of matter.
Think of a whirlpool in a river. To anyone watching, a whirlpool looks like a distinct, solid object, right? It has a diameter, it has a specific speed. But if you try to scoop it up and take that whirlpool home with you, you find absolutely nothing. It's made entirely of the river water. It isn't a thing, it's a behavior of the water. Your brain is exactly like that whirlpool. It's not a generator of consciousness, it's a localizer. It's just a temporary structure in the universal field of consciousness that filters the infinite down into a bounded, localized me.
Once you really grasp this, that whole simulation debate we talked about earlier, it just completely collapses. All that existential dread over AI or waking up in a matrix, it's totally misplaced. Because if consciousness is fundamental, the distinction between a real world of atoms and a simulated world of bits is meaningless. Both of them are just appearances happening within you. You've been so terrified of being a fake character in a video game, but the character isn't what's real. The awareness rendering the process is what's real. Meaning isn't found in the pixels. It's the quality of attention you bring to the screen.
So let's bring this all back home. I want you to look around your room one more time. The chair, the window, the dust motes floating in the light. We used to think you were like a coin trapped inside a jar, and the only big mystery was figuring out what the jar was made of. But the truth is, there is no jar. You are never inside reality. You are not a guest in a container called space. You are the space in which the universe is currently performing the act of being human. Awareness itself is the true, ultimate container.
We've traveled all the way from the glitchy uncertainty of quantum probability smears to the holographic boundaries of space and right into the absolute center of your own undeniable awareness. Science didn't find a cold, dead machine. It found a participatory mirror. Which leaves us with one incredibly profound, lingering thought to take away from this explainer. If you aren't a ghost sitting inside the universe, what exactly is the universe doing inside you?